Hello and welcome, Killer Off-Road Hobbies fans. Today we are doing a full review and my thoughts video on none other than the Losi Super Baja Rey from Horizon Hobbies. Let's get into it. So diving into this, I want to make this a nice short video. There's no need to drag this out because basically it's just a simple question of, is this truck worth the money? And is it fun? Is it durable? Does it have power? So basically, let's just kind of go through all of this stuff, and I'll throw a little bit of action clips in there while I'm talking you through this. So just to kind of go over a couple of the stats, this is a 1/6 scale 4-wheel drive trophy truck, short course truck, stadium truck, whatever you want to call it. It's a trophy truck. It has an independent front suspension. It's got a solid axle in the rear with a trailing arm suspension, kind of four-link setup. This thing is 2 to 8S capable with the ESC, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's just keep going with it. And it does have a 1/6 scale brushless motor. So this thing is pretty built. It is much bigger than you think when you see it in person. This is actually as long and wide as an X-Max, maybe even a tiny bit longer. Of course, it's not as tall, but it has a real plus suspension travel, the 4-wheel drive, the tires, and everything. This thing, I will just say it right now, just works. We'll get to jumping in a moment, but as far as driving experience, I have to give this thing an A+. It is very, 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 very fun to drive. And if you like highlight reel crashes, Oh, Jesus! Ooh, yeah. Ooh. Ooh, couldn't save that one. Oh, golly. Yeah, like those right there. This thing has that in aces. Pretty much these trophy trucks, these larger scale trophy trucks, just kind of do that. The UDR and the Mojave and this, they all just have highlight reel crashes. Things, when they tend to go wrong, like, you know, in the air or whatever, they go very, very, very wrong, and it is relatively entertaining and cringeworthy to watch a lot of the crashes that these things take. But the cool thing is they do take them. This truck is built very, very well. I mean, I really, 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 really pushed the limits of this truck, and we'll come to the breakages in a second, but I'm just gonna get down to the brass tacks and say I think this truck is an absolute blast, and I enjoy driving this very, very much. Now, when it comes to hang time or airing this out, jumping this thing, I would keep it mellow. So I would stay to medium to small size jumps at best. I mean, you can air this thing out, it can crash, it can take a beating, but I think the fun part of driving this truck is to just drive it how it was designed to be driven. You know, going over rugged terrain and stuff like that. That is where I think this truck shines very, very well. And believe me, you don't have to air this thing out to have a ton of fun driving it. Now, I did have a couple breakages in my 6S bash video, and as you've seen previously in kind of my highlight reel crash sequence, this thing took an absolute beating, and it wasn't that much worse for the wear. I mean, I could have overlooked the small breakages it had, except for one thing, and we'll go over that in a second. But here are the parts I broke. So this is the front part of the cage that goes right here, and this broke right here, which isn't that big of a deal. I mean, you still have a lot of structure and everything to protect any of the internals. So this breakage, while I would definitely fix it, it wasn't an absolute mandatory thing to fix to drive the truck. Now, the other breakage I had with this truck was just in front of that on the front bumper. So this part broke right here, and this and this are on the same side. So I'm guessing because that was broke is why the impact after this was broken broke this. Now, another thing I did run into from this crash right here. Oh God. Is that when it landed like that really hard, there are 3 little ears on the ESC that they use to screw it down to the top of the center diff. Now, those 3 ears broke off, and I do have to say this thing is, I did find that the ESC is supposed to be waterproof. So at the end of my 6S bash video, when I said this thing is possibly not waterproof, I was wrong in that, because one of my leads from my motor had actually come loose and was barely in there, and all it took was me like rubbing against it with my finger when I was like looking at what happened for it to pop out. So I think that was the problem I was having, because the ESC is classified as waterproof, even though it doesn't say in any of the things I've read, like on A main or anything. It doesn't say this truck is waterproof. It doesn't say it on the box. So, or I didn't see it on the box at least. So I wasn't sure about the waterproofness, but apparently from doing further research, it does say that the ESC is waterproof, the servo is waterproof, and the motor is waterproof. So this thing is supposed to be waterproof. I'm pretty sure it's waterproof, and I'm pretty sure the problem I had was that loose lead from the motor. Other than that, this truck was an absolute blast, okay? And I highly recommend it. And like I said, I do give this thing an A+ in fun. Like, this thing is very fun to drive around. I wouldn't air it out though. Like, I can't stress that enough. I know people just want to take this thing, and people have called it the X-Max killer, and it's super, super durable. It'll never break. And that is true. It is very, very durable. I wouldn't even classify this. Like I said, I'm not going to compare this to the X-Max because they're not even in the same realm. They're not even remotely close to being the same type of vehicle. So I'm not going to compare it to that, but what I will compare it to for you guys is the Mojave and the UDR. Now, I think all 3 of these trucks shine in their own way, in their own, you know, at their own things. I would say workability, like being able to work on it, the Mojave is definitely the easiest to work on, because basically it's just a body on top of a buggy chassis. So, I mean, it's just easy to work on, and there's not a whole lot of stuff to take apart and everything to actually get in there and fix it. I would have to give the Mojave the durability factor too as well, because out of all the crashes I had with this thing, with the UDR and the Mojave was the only one that didn't break anything. The only thing that happened to that truck at all was one of the screws on the little bumper that goes through the Lexan body pulled out, and I just put a new screw back in. So I would say durable wise would have to go to the Mojave. Now, coming to the power realm, while all 3 of these have a ton of power, I think the Mojave again has the most, but it's also the lightest and the smallest out of the 3. So, I mean, it's hard to compare the Mojave to the UDR and to the Super Baja Rey. because, like I said, it's basically a buggy chassis with a body on it, with a trophy truck body on it. And it has full independent suspension and stuff. So, coming to, you know, comparably, say scale-wise, I think out of all three scale-wise, I think for sure the UDR is the most absolute scale looking and driving. I mean, the UDR and the Super Baja Rey both drive like trophy trucks. They've got a lot of suspension travel. They've got the solid rear axle. The rear axle drops out when you're when you're airborne and everything. So I mean, the realistic features there are just phenomenal. So I'll just wrap this up by saying, out of the three, the Mojave, the Super Baja Rey, and the UDR, my personal favorite out of the three is still the UDR. My personal, that's me personally. Now, everybody's subject to their own beliefs, their own opinions and everything, and that's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying buy the UDR over the Super Baja Rey. I'm not saying buy the Mojave over the Baja Rey and then buy the UDR over the Mojave. I'm not saying any of that. I think all three trucks will serve everybody that buys them very well, and you'll be happy with them if a trophy truck is what you're looking to get. I personally, my own opinion, I can't stress that enough because, you know, this is the internet. My personal opinion is that I personally like the UDR more. But I definitely give this thing an A+. It is very fun. It is very durable. It's got tons of power. If I was to keep this thing, which unfortunately I'm not going to, but if I was to keep this thing, what I would do personally is run it on 4S, not 6S, not 8S. I would run this thing on 4S and just drive it how it is supposed to be driven. I would just drive it on what a trophy truck is made for. Rugged, uneven terrain, you know, some whoops, some small jumps, take it to the sand, you know, just have a blast with it. And trust me, if you get one of these and have a decent 4S pack that you plug in there, you will be more than satisfied, in my opinion. All right, everybody, so that's my full review and thoughts on the Losi Super Baja Rey. Please thumb up this video if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Stay tuned to Killer Off-Road Hobbies, or subscribe if you're new here. Click that bell, check out that description, and we will see you on the next video. Until then, peace.